how do narcissists test their victims? Why do they test them at all? Number one, they test them because they want to make sure that you are for them. Because in a narcissist world, in their weird world of turmoil and the vortex of craziness, you're either for them or you're against them. If you are not for them, then you are the enemy. You become public enemy number one. So they're constantly checking to make sure that you are for them. And so you're constantly having to try to prove it all the time. And they test you in many different ways. So the reason why they do this is because they need an endless amount of what we call supply. They basically want to make sure that you are going to be there to serve what the whole purpose is of you being around to begin with, which is to feed their need for narcissistic supply. So narcissistic supply is anything that feeds their ego, which is, compliments, adulation, respect, all of those things, of course. And if you don't give them those things in the form of good supply, then they'll take it. Well, they'll take it anyway in the form of what we call bad supply, which is devaluing and debasing and making you feel bad, judging you, putting you down, little passive-aggressive things to make it known to you that you have very little worth to them. And sometimes it's little tiny things, that just kind of drip, drip, drip on your head, where it's seriously death by 1,000 cuts, or making you crazy by just doing these little things all the time. But when they're testing you, they are just making sure that you're going to stick around no matter what, even if they treat you poorly. They want to know, are you for me or against me? So they'll mistreat you, they'll put you down, they'll call you names, they'll give you the silent treatment. That's one of their biggest, by the way, is silent treatment. It's all a method of getting you back under their web of control. Because remember, the narcissistic relationship is love bomb, devalue, discard. And if you want to know more about the narcissistic relationship, check out my videos on love bombing, devaluing, and discarding. I go much more deeply into what a narcissistic relationship looks like. It always starts with love bomb. It always ends with discard. And I had somebody tell me it's toxic stew in between, which is definitely true. But what happens is, as they're devaluing you, they can often be love bombing you. And this is all a way to keep you under their web of control. So they will be saying things to test you, by devaluing you, by causing you pain, which they don't have the ability to feel your pain. But they're going to be doing these things just to see if you're going to stick around. So silent treatment is one big one. They will just simply, stop talking to you because they want you to come back to them. Please talk to me. Please forgive me. I am so sorry for whatever I did, so that they can come back to you and they'll say, okay, fine. They might just have a tantrum, have a full-on meltdown because of the way you acted, because they want to see, are you going to stick around? Are you going to leave? Or are you going to be for me? Or are you going to be against me? They might even use hoovering or coming back. Even in the discard phase, they come back. And I see that often in divorces. What happens is, in a divorce situation, they can be acting heinous in a divorce, gaslighting you, using everything against you, using the court system against you, threatening to take your children away, threatening that you're going to pay lots of alimony, threatening that you're not going to get any if that's what you want. Threat all over the place, lying in pleadings, lying in motions, lying to lawyers, lying to the mediator, manipulating evidence, all this kinds of stuff. is going on. And then right in the middle of that, they say, they'll send you an email. Oh, why are we doing this? You know that we can just get along. You know how this isn't so good for the kids. Why are we spending this money? And trying to grab you back in. Again, testing to see if they still have power over you, if they still have the ability to control you. For you guys who've been tested before and you think that you've been tested by a narcissist, give me a yup in the comments. Another way that narcissists test their victims is on the phone. So let's say you're having a telephone conversation with them, and while you're having the conversation, you feel like, okay, we've talked about what we needed to talk about, so now I want to hang up the phone. They'll say, oh, why do you want to hang up first? Don't you want to talk to me anymore? And they don't want you, that's like a form of rejection for them. Another one that's related to that is you walking away. So you're in the middle of a fight. Even if they've walked away 100,000 times and didn't listen to you, they'll do the same thing back to you. Walk away so that, you're the one groveling after them saying, please don't walk away. We can work this out. Come on back. Let's talk. And they're just testing you to see if you're going to go back after them. They're testing you to see if you are going to show them the respect that they want. And that's another way that they test you, by the way, is they'll constantly say things like, you don't respect me, you don't love me, you don't give me the time that I want. You're always giving time to everybody else, but you're not giving time back to me. How come you're putting everybody else first? Those are all types of phrases to test you, to see what you're going to say. Are you going to say, oh, no, you're first. Oh, no, I'm so sorry that I put somebody else in front of you. Of course, you mean the most to me. Yes, I love you. Of course, I love you. Here's all the ways that I love you. So, making sure that you're still there. You're still the one. I mean, they might even make you do something for them just to see if you're going to do it, because they're testing you. They want to make sure that you're for them. They have to constantly have reassurance that you're for them. So the truth is, they're testing you from the beginning of the relationship. A lot of times what you see with narcissists is they move in super quickly. The relationship is super fast-tracked in the love bomb stage. So, let's meet your kids right away. I want to move, if you have children from a previous relationship, or I want to move right into your home right away. And they're testing to see if you are the right type of supply for them by how you respond to that. Because, do you let them move in right away? Do you say, I love you right away? Do you immediately agree that you're supposed to be soulmates? And yes, you're meant to be together. And how crazy is it that you just met and you're soulmates and you're meant to be together? That kind of thing. So the bottom line is that narcissists are testing you from the minute you walk into their lives until the minute that you go no contact and actually stop talking to them, because they always want to know, can you be a form of supply for them? And if you're not, then you are the enemy, and they're going to go after you, smear you, try to take you down as much as possible. So talk about your role as an empath and how that actually made you more of a target for narcissists, because I think it's really important that people understand that.
Well, I think there's a lot of factors that make us targets, and being an empath is one, being someone that has no boundaries. So in my recovery, I had to learn my own accountability. After I learned about them and the behaviors and the stages and all of the stuff that goes into what a narcissist does, I had to then go, why me, right? And that was, yes, I'm an empath. Yes, I'm a people pleaser. I will do anything for anyone. I don't care. I will move your house next weekend if you need me to. And so a giving, caring person. But there's other things like the boundaries. I realized I was raised by a narcissistic mother in the end of this whole journey, and that's why I didn't learn boundaries. So when a narcissist is looking for someone, the empath part is a big part because they can get away with more, but someone that has loose boundaries. So they've tested you all along to see if you'd be a good person that would do their beck and call. So no boundaries is a thing. Being a people pleaser is another thing. Your own childhood, they look for what you're looking for. Because I had kind of a crappy family, if you would, I wanted someone with a really good family. They seemed so upstanding. They went on vacations together. And so I became attracted to that. So they dangled the carrot of, oh, we've got a good family. Come to our house. We'll be your family. And so they're looking for whatever you're looking for. Your vulnerabilities are have to be explored. And I have a course that is how to change the story and how to learn what your vulnerabilities are so that you don't give that information to the next person in your life.
And we'll make sure to drop a link to that course in our notes as well, so that people can find that if they want that. But I think that's so true, and I have seen that too. And the other thing is that I've noticed, because one of the covert narcissists in my life is a family member. And I went to dinner with one of my dearest friends, who's a licensed clinical psychologist and a PhD and brilliant, And I was saying that my husband was feeling guilty about, putting up boundaries. And my friend said that guilt was actually instilled by this person, that his sense of what's right and what's wrong is actually from that person. And so, he feels bad about putting up boundaries because that's what this person wanted him to feel. And so that was a huge aha moment for us. And through his own work and whatever, he's decided to have more boundaries with this person. And it's been better for both of us in the long run. But it's, you feel guilty, but remember that a lot of what you're feeling is what they've conditioned you to feel.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. And when I have a book on narcissistic in-laws in up on Amazon, and I think the Audible just got approved, so hopefully that'll get out there.
That's on my website as well. I have it featured as my narcissist resources.
Good, yay! But it's if you have a narcissistic parent. So, and I'll use the example of my husband having a narcissistic parent. He's controlled by that person, and either they have the strength to stand up to their parents so that they can protect the spouse, or they are so controlled, say by money in my case, that they've got to listen to the holy grail of the parent. So you've got these different levels of where your spouse, if you've got a narcissistic in-law, could be, where they're sort of looking at it and going, well, my husband can't even battle with his mom. He's not strong enough because he's been emotionally manipulated his whole life. That's how it was for us. They manipulated him into this divorce and ran the show. And so for me, that was such an important part out there, because people think, oh God, what am I going to do about this narcissistic in-law? And I'm using my case as an example, but it comes down to your spouse being able to stand up to them, right? If your spouse can't stand up to them, then you're in big trouble. And so when we decide to marry, we have to look at the whole family with a different lens these days.
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of times you don't even realize the person is a narcissist, especially if they're a covert narcissist, because they're so good at hiding. Like, the rest of the world thinks this person is wonderful. They purposely put themselves in positions where everyone thinks they're wonderful. I mean, they're oftentimes clergy or doctors, or, in places.
Doctors,
yeah, politicians, where they only show their bad side to their target. No one else sees it. And even with their target, they're constantly gaslighting. Well, I thought we had that conversation. You agreed to that. And it's something completely different than what you agreed to. Or, I agreed. I told you that I would, take care of the bills. And, somebody's saying, I thought you were going to put the money in the bank account. I told you I would take care of it. And 3 days later, you're like, the money's still not in the bank account. Well, I told you I would take care of it. I meant I would take care of the bills. Well, and they're constantly changing it. Well, then they haven't even paid the bills yet. I mean, and so I'm kind of getting a little bit into tricks people play in divorce. And I know you're writing a book on that. And I wanted to give you an opportunity to talk about that also. So I don't want to steal your thunder on that. So talk about that a little bit.
Sure. So I am writing a book. We're hoping it'll be out by June. It is called You Can't Make This Shit Up. Then there's a whole subtitle about narcissists and how to be a survivor through it. But I've actually sourced not only hundreds of tricks that people from my website submitted, from my Facebook group and from my support groups that I run have submitted and gone, this is what they've done, and taken that same trick and going, well, here's how you could have helped yourself on that. They turned off all the electricity in your house because it was in their name. As soon as they move out, put it in your name, protect yourself, things there are things that we can do to protect some of these things. But the idea is that they have been planning this in their mind for a very long time. So even before a mention of divorce has happened, they're usually hiding money. They're usually controlling the accounts, and they started the smear campaigns. They are trying to isolate you by slowly dripping conversations to your friends. And there's a few that are really common, like she's an alcoholic, she's a bipolar person, him, her, whatever it is. But they've been slipping that to your friends for a long time with concern, not in oh gosh, Tracy had so many drinks at the party last week. She's doing that so much more often. I'm really worried about her. That's just a planting of a seed before anything happens. Now, when they decide to have the divorce, all of a sudden you're a full-blown alcoholic. And look, I've got proof. Didn't I not tell you about that 3 months ago? So a lot of it has been seeded before the whole event happens. But, I've had people with fake filing where they've gotten legal papers from their husband and, oh my God, he just filed for divorce on me. And it was a fake document. And the game and the trick with that was to simply convince her that they could use the same lawyer. You don't need your own lawyer. But look, I've already filed. So, why file? I did it. We're good.
Yeah, that's a huge one. And I can tell you as a lawyer, the lawyers can't represent both of you. They can only represent one of you.
Oh, see, and that's part of the game. At least they try it, right? They throw it out there to take you off from getting a lawyer. Hold back hold back the money so that you aren't able to hire the lawyer. So many people get stuck in that rut. And I know a lot of people end up having to take it out of, say, a 401k to be able to start the divorce process. And when you've got no assets and you're stuck, that's how they control you. They think, oh, I've got her money, she can't do it. And you end up with the raw end of the deal. But there's so many tricks they can do, both before, during court, and continuing for many, many years after, right?
Okay, so I want to get real. Sometimes it's hard to have a conversation about abuse and about emotional abuse in particular. I mean, a lot of times people only really want to talk about certain types of abuse, and emotional abuse, especially when you are in a toxic situation. I've practiced law for a long time, and they talk about no fault divorce, and people like fault doesn't matter and all that sort of thing. And first of all, I want to dispel a myth, because a lot of times people think, well, no fault divorce means fault never matters. And that is definitely a myth, because no fault just means that you don't have to prove fault in order to get a divorce. Like years ago, you had to prove fault in order to get a divorce. No fault means is you just don't have to prove fault in order to get a divorce. Years ago, you had to have certain grounds like abandonment or something like that. Now you just have to say irretrievably broken or whatever. But it doesn't mean fault never matters. Fault can come into play. For sure, there are times that fault can come into play. Now, emotional abuse is a little bit more tricky, though, because it is much harder to prove in a divorce situation. And suffice it to say, emotional abuse is certainly abuse for sure. And there are times that you can weave it into a case, especially if you can look at it in terms of a custody statute or something like that. We will make sure that we put the domestic violence hotline below for any of you guys. I want to make sure that all of you guys have access to that number, and please make sure you take advantage of using it if you think that you are in an abusive situation, okay? So what the domestic violence hotline says is, maybe in an emotionally or verbally abusive relationship, if your partner attempts to exert control by, number one, calling you names, insulting you, or constantly criticizing you. So that is emotional abuse, number one. Number two is acting jealous, possessive, or refusing to trust you. So that is another way that you can be considered to be in a emotionally or verbally abusive relationship. Okay. Especially if somebody is constantly accusing you of doing things just for no reason whatsoever. And I remember one time I had this client, she almost literally looked like a nun. She was this older woman who would wear these cardigan sweaters, like buttoned up to her neck. And she had this short gray hair, and she would not wear any makeup. And her husband was this Middle Eastern physician who had been very, very successful. But she was so sweet and prim and proper. Literally, if she just, spoke to another male, because the other male would say hello to her in an elevator or something, he would accuse her of having an affair with this other male. I mean, he was so paranoid and so ridiculously, insanely jealous. That was so emotionally abusive. So acting jealous like that in a way that's just not rational can be very, very emotionally abusive to you. Okay. The next one is isolating you from family or friends or other people in your life. You're not allowed to make phone calls at a certain time, or you're not allowed to go see people at a certain time. I remember knowing somebody one time where the husband would actually take note of how many miles were on the car and wouldn't let her drive. That's so emotionally abusive. That's the next one. The next one is monitoring your activities with or without your knowledge, including demanding to know where you go, who are you in contact with, how you spend your time, constantly monitoring you, putting a GPS on your car, things like that. Why do they need to do that? Constantly controlling you, knowing where you are. The next one, attempting to control what you wear, including clothes, makeup, or hairstyles. I remember having a client one time where she had been married to a malignant narcissist, and she talked about when they finally got back together, she had left him. And then when she got back together with him and she thought he had changed, and they were going to therapy, and they were getting ready to go to dinner one night, and under her breath, he said something about, oh, lipstick. Made a comment about the fact that she was wearing lipstick. Like that was so bad. The fact that she was wearing lipstick at all, somehow she was supposed to feel like bad about that in some way, like she was some sort of, slut or something. The fact that she had lipstick on, that's another one. The next one is humiliating you in any way, especially in front of others. Just horrible. Any kind of humiliation in front of others is bad. Nothing more needs to be even said about that. Next one is gaslighting you by pretending not to understand or refusing to listen to you, questioning your recollection of facts, events, or sources, trivializing your need if you have feelings, or denying your previous statements. Anytime somebody says, if you feel like you have needs and you're saying, this is the way you feel, and they say, that's not the way you feel, or if they're saying, oh, that's ridiculous, or that's not what you're seeing, or anytime somebody is making you feel like you're crazy, that's gaslighting. Refusing to listen to you, that's gaslighting. Making jokes about you that are hurtful, and then saying that you can't take a joke, you're butt is fat or whatever. Oh, you can't take a joke. Those kinds of things are hurtful. You see a text message exchange between your significant other and somebody of the opposite sex, and it looks suggestive, and you ask them about it, and they say, oh, you're reading too much into it. You're probably not. That sort of thing. So that's gaslighting. Next one is threatening you, your children, your family, or your pets with or without weapons. Any kind of threatening. If you do this, this is going to happen. You better stop it. Where you feel in fear, you're worried for your safety, you're worried that something's going to happen. Never okay. Absolutely never okay. Damaging your belongings, including throwing objects, punching walls, kicking doors. Never okay. If your property gets destroyed, things get broken, that's just absolutely never okay. Blaming you for abusive behavior, again, never okay. I go back to a Maya Angelou quote, which was always so perfect. When people show you who they are, believe them the first time. Okay. And then when they try to say they're sorry, it's like that narcissist faux apology. It's probably a bunch of crap. And I have a whole video on what narcissists really mean when they say they're sorry. And you can definitely check that out. Probably sorry, not sorry. Don't believe them. Stand in your power. And, you can put that in the comments. I stand in my power. Put that in the comments right now. I stand in my power. Okay. Next one is accusing you of cheating, or cheating themselves and blaming you for their actions. That projection and deflection, or lying and denying, always narc moves. All right. Or cheating to intentionally hurt you, and then threatening to cheat again to suggest they're better than you. They're always going after better forms of supply. You know that, right? You know that they can get their better forms of supply to try to put you in your place. And then the last one is telling you that you're so lucky to be with them. And I have a whole video, by the way, on narcissists' favorite catchphrases, which you can definitely check out. That's, one of the things that they'll say, like, you're so lucky to be with me. When they say stuff like that, it's just so ridiculous. Don't believe things like that. You'll never find somebody else as good as me. You'll never find anybody else who loves you as much as me. Those are phrases designed to try to control you, okay? Those are all things to try to manipulate you, destabilize you, to keep you under their thumb, because they have no sense of self. And so they're trying to keep you in their power. All right. So those are all signs of emotional abuse. Some people I know who are watching this have probably seen a lot of them, maybe even all of them. If that's you, for sure, definitely take advantage of calling that hotline. So, what do narcissists love to do? They love to accuse you of things falsely. Why do they love to accuse you of things falsely? Because they love to trigger you. They love to get under your skin. But let's take that a step even further. Okay, so what has been going on in your relationship? All right. So, first of all, you have probably been supplying them. You've been giving them narcissistic supply. It started off where they love bombed you. They love bombed you. They came on super strong, were impossible to resist. They were charming. They were charismatic. They seemed perfect at the beginning. Am I right? Okay. Now, you thought that they were amazing. You thought they were wonderful. Maybe you thought they even loved you. Maybe you thought that they were perfect, all of these things. Now, it was all a manipulation. I'm sorry to have to tell you this. It was all a manipulation. It was all meant to get this form of supply from you. Now, I have to tell you, there are a couple of different kinds of supply. What you've probably been giving them is like the best form of supply. And the best forms of supply for them are, adulation, service, making them look good, really, really stroking their ego at the top level. There's these different phases of a narcissistic relationship. There's the love bombing, and then you go into the devaluing, and then there's the discarding. And I have videos, by the way, on all the different phases of a narcissistic relationship, the love bombing, the devaluing, and the discarding. Definitely check out my videos on all of those phases of a narcissistic relationship if you haven't checked those out. When you go to leave a narcissistic relationship, whether it's you leaving or them leaving, that's when you go into that discard phase. That's when you see that smear campaign start. That's the birth of the smear campaign. By the way, it can start even before you even realize that the discard phase has started. All right. And I do have a whole video on how to shut down a narcissist smear campaign. You can check that out too. But what's happening is during this discard phase is that you've become public enemy number one, and you're no longer giving them the best form of supply anymore. So now they're going to want to continue to get supply from you, but they're just going to take it in the lower form of supply, which is making you miserable, making you squirm, showing them that they can still have control over you in some way. And so how are they going to do that? They're going to do these false allegations. And so they're going to start either through the court system, which is what I've seen as an attorney, by the way, over and over and over again. I mean, they file this stuff either through the pleadings. So you'll see it in the divorce pleadings. Well, they'll actually say these things in the divorce petition. They'll say father was a, molester. I mean, I've seen that. Horrible, horrible things like that, or a wife beater or a child beater, or, they will say, the worst possible things you can imagine, where you think, oh my gosh, I never even touched them. The worst possible things. Or they will just even say things like they didn't pay child support, they withheld money, things like that. Or they spent lots of money. They spent lots of money on the people, lies about things like that. You will see those kinds of things in actual documents that are filed with the court. I think it's important that we walk through the types of false allegations that you will see. Then the other types of false allegations that you will see as well are people will see in the actual letters that go back and forth between the attorneys. They'll tell their attorney they didn't feed the children, that the children ate candy all weekend long, or nothing all weekend long, or pizza or junk food all the entire time that they were with the dad or the mom, or that the whole time they were with the dad or the mom, they were with a babysitter or nobody, all kinds of things. I mean, the types of false allegations or accusations when you're dealing with narcissists are really endless. I mean, completely infinite. And honestly, the funny thing is they will contradict themselves over and over and over again. That's the thing that's really interesting and also very, very helpful for you, because this is where you can start building your leverage. And this is where my SLAY methodology will very, very much help you. Strategy, leverage, anticipate where they're going to go, be 2 steps ahead of them, and focus on you, your case, and your position. That's what the SLAY methodology is. And it will very much help you because they are liars. And you know what judges hate more than anything? They hate liars. And narcissists are lazy. They're also very, very lazy. They also ignore court orders. And judges hate lazy liars who ignore court orders. And narcissists are all of those things. And I'll tell you that at the end of the day, if you are just diligent in keeping track of these things, you really will be able to catch them. And so the thing that you have to remember is to just keep your wits about you and remember who you're dealing with and not allow them to get the best of you. Understand who it is that you're dealing with. And every time they do one of those things that they do, just say, thank you very much. You just gave me something else. Understand that what it is that you're building. You have to play a little bit of the long game. All right. So I'm going to give you 6 ways to deal with the narcissist false allegations, but just understand that yes, they do this. Yes, they're trying to trigger you. Yes, they're trying to get you to look like the crazy one. That's why they do it. They want you to be triggered, number 1, because they get supply from it. Number 2, they want you to look like the crazy one. So when you get sucked into that mud and you react, they go, oh, look, you're the crazy one. And you took that bait, hook, line, and sinker. They use your reaction against you. And there you go. Don't get sucked into it. So that's number 2. And then number 3, as long as you are giving them that supply, as long as they catch that fish, they will never leave you alone because you are giving them that supply. So you don't want to go into it because of that as well. All right, 6 ways to deal with the narcissist false allegations. Number 1, you can respond. Do not react. Do not react. And I know you know that that was where I was going, right? You know, it's like they got the fish. Do not give them that. Unless you want to be that fish that they've reeled in, don't be that for them. You know, you can respond. Do not react. Just picture yourself. You're that fish that they've reeled in. Okay, don't be that. So that's one way to deal with the narcissist false allegations. Number 2, make sure to document. And in my SLAY program, I have the 12 areas that you should be documenting. I have a whole chart on that, and I have a whole module on this, but make sure that you are being very, very diligent on how you are documenting, and do it in real time. Please do yourself a favor and do it in real time. It is so hard to go back and try to recreate, oh, what was that? What day was that? And they give you so much material. They really do. I remember a case one time where, you know, the wife threw the son, it was like a 14-year-old son, threw him out of the house at, 4:00 in the morning. Just she had a big fight with the son. It's like in the middle of December. It was like cold out. His husband had to go pick up the son. And she sends the husband an email saying, yeah, it's probably better if we take some time apart from each other. You should call the school bus service and have the bus start picking him up at your house, for now. And then the next thing you know, the lawyer gets a motion saying that husband has been withholding son from wife and all of this stuff, when there's an email out there that says, you should call the bus service. I mean, it's like mind blowing, but this is the kind of thing that they do. So that's why you document. You keep it in a file. You just have all this stuff. You have it ready to go so that you don't have to go back. You don't have to go look for all this stuff. What day was that? You know what I'm saying? Keep track of it in real time. And I have a whole other video, by the way, on how to keep your cool against narcissists. Definitely check that out too. So that's number 2. Number 3 is don't get sucked into the mud. Do not get sucked into the mud. Start looking at it as if you're a third party. Try starting to look at it as if you're an observer. I have a video where I was interviewing Judge Lynn Toller from television's divorce court, and she talked about that too, where you just start looking at it as if you're looking at something happening. Oh, I see that you're upset. Oh, I see that, you are unhappy about something. You want to tell me more about that? Because you have to understand that these are people who are just deeply unhappy and that's what you're dealing with. So, don't be surprised when they act like themselves. Be surprised if they act normal. Okay. So that's number 3 way to deal with a narcissist, false allegations. And then number 4 is become like Teflon when it comes to those guilt trips. They're going to try to guilt you into things a lot of times. That's another way that they try to suck you in to this thing. One way, of course, is they try to trigger you by getting you angry or saying things. But another way is they try to guilt you into it. Oh, I thought maybe you might want to take care of your family, or I thought that you were a better mother than that, but I guess not. Something like that. Don't go for the guilt thing either. Become like Teflon, stand in your power. What's right. Just remember, keep your focus on what to be fair, what to be what's right, what to be what's equitable. Don't allow their manipulation to get inside your head anymore, because a lot of times the voices inside your head, especially if you've been with this person for a long time, are their voices and not your voices, and not the voices of what's reality or what's your own voice. And that's why, you've got to create these boundaries, and you've got to start staying away from them and keeping your interactions as brief and unemotional as possible, and just not allowing them to penetrate your space. So don't allow them to penetrate. Okay, so that's number 4. And by the way, if you agree with me so far on all of this, give me a spot on in the comments. Just say spot on so far. And number 5 is use one method for communications. And again, this is your way of not allowing yourself to be attacked from 50 different directions, right? So you're going to use one method for communication, and it really should be just email or an app. If you have children, you can use an app. Again, they may try to goad you. They may try to say, oh, why do you have to be so rigid? We can talk in different directions. We can talk. How come we can't, just meet somewhere or whatever, especially because they're going to try to push the boundaries, push the different directions. Just don't do that. Don't engage. Just say, no, we're going to use one form and it's going to be email. All right. So let's talk about how narcissists test their victims, their new targets. This is really, really important because what's happening is they are actually conditioning you so that they're destabilizing you, they're weakening you. And then when you go to negotiate with them, you've already been conditioned. And then when you go to negotiate with them, you actually now have to recondition them. And that's why you're kind of like nervous about negotiating with them, because you kind of actually realize on a subconscious level that you've been conditioned. That if you try to fight back, that they're going to kind of rage against you because they've conditioned you to a place where if you try to do anything, that they're going to act a certain way. And how this all started was when they in this testing phase. And that's why this testing phase is really, really an important phase. And how do they do that? It's kind of on a micro level, but it starts off right off the bat during this love bombing phase. They target people who are strong. They're targeting people who have lots of great qualities. They want people who have lots of value. And I say it all the time, they're not looking for people who have no value. They didn't target you because you have so little value. They target you because you have so much value. They want supply. So they love people who are strong, who have great connections, who are beautiful people, who have great personalities, who have lots of value in the world, who are maybe have lots of prestige, who are successful. They want that. They want what you have. I mean, a lot of times they want to kind of suck it from you, almost like a pod or something. But then once they get you into their world, then they want to kind of take over you. So that's when they start to manipulate you. They want to start to devalue you. And then they test to see how you behave when they do that. So they'll start doing things like giving you the silent treatment or ghosting you. And then they see, how do you behave when they do that? Did you allow it? Or lying to you? And how did you behave when that happened? Did you let it go? Didn't take responsibility for something that they should have? Did you let it go? Did they give you an explanation for something that didn't really add up? Did they project, deflect? Did they lie? And you said, okay, did you buy it? Were they able to charm you? Were they able to charm you into believing it? Were they able to love bomb you back into their web? Were they able to get you to forget about it and be back on track? Did they have a tantrum? And you stepped back and you went, okay, never mind. How did you behave with that? Did you stay with them through that? If they started interrogating you, how did you behave through that? If they started playing the victim, how did you behave? I have a whole video, by the way, on, if you catch a narcissist in a lie, what happens, which you should definitely check out. But, it's like the whole lying and denying and deflection and projection and the whole thing. How did you behave with that? Because the more that they get away with, the more that they realize that they can kind of pull you back, push on you, pull you back, push on you, pull you back, push on you. They're conditioning you. And by the way, there's this whole study that was done by a psychologist named, I think it was a psychologist named Robert Sapolsky, and he was out of Stanford University. many, many years ago, and he did a study on monkeys where he gave a monkey a treat every single time they did something good, and nothing happened in their brain. He was studying what happened with the chemicals in their brain. And then when they did something great, he only gave them the reward intermittently. And then he studied what happened in their brain. The dopamine levels in their brain were released. That feel good hormone in their brain actually rose to the level of cocaine. Like, it felt so good to them. Just the anticipation that they would be receiving this reward, not the actual reward itself, not that the fact that they were going to get the reward, just the anticipation that they were going to get the reward, these dopamine levels would release. And so that's what happens with people who are in relationship with narcissists. They get this anticipation that they're going to get this reward of this love bomb because they come on so strong, so charming, so amazing. And so they're able to charm you. And so they're conditioning. Are you going to forget about it? Oh, let the past be the past. We're going to go forward. Do you go along with that? Do you believe in that? Do you let the future faking wash over you? Do you go along with the future faking? Do you buy into it? So that's what they're doing. That's the testing process. That's the conditioning. It's very, very, very sick. And it's very highly manipulative, but that's what they're doing. That's how they test you. And that's what's going on when they are testing you. And if you've seen this, I want to see you put "I've seen this" in the comments right now, because I bet you guys have seen this. I bet you guys have experienced this. They are conditioning you. And so what happens now in the negotiation phase is you guys have to condition them back. You guys have to start making these micro steps that other direction. And that's how you start shifting the dynamic, because you're going to start to march forward in a different direction and you're going to start to turn the tables. Okay, so covert narcissists are actually the ones that I personally have had to deal with myself. I have had to deal with it in a business situation, and my husband and I have had to deal with one in our family. So we personally know the horrible situation that it is with covert narcissists. I mean, they are the ones that are like stealth, they're under the radar, the ones that kind of seem nice on the surface. Everybody thinks that they're so nice. And the ones that actually are the worst to deal with, because it's like death by 1,000 cuts. And the ones that when you go to tell people about how they are, people go, well, I don't know, that doesn't seem so bad. Maybe it seems inadvertent. They couldn't have really meant that because they seem so nice, that kind of thing. And I don't know, I talk so much more all about their personality in my video, The Covert Passive Aggressive Narcissist. So you might want to check out my video on that particular topic. But anyway, going back to how they have to distract themselves, because they are actually really quite miserable people underneath the surface. So they have to distract themselves from their misery. And how do they do that? Well, they do that in a number of ways. Well, one of the ways that they do that is they find their supply. And they have to constantly find new supply, because once people are onto them, then they have to move on. It's like vultures that are picking apart the carcass. Once that carcass is all picked over, then they have to move on down the road to find a new carcass to pick over. And by the way, they get bored of that carcass as well. Once they see a better source of supply, they want to move on. Extremely opportunistic. In fact, I remember, like once you have seen the light, and you guys probably will understand exactly what I'm talking about when you have seen the light. You start to look back and then you start to go, oh, I remember that conversation taking place. And it all starts to make more sense as you start to see. You go, oh, I remember that. Now I understand what was going on. And I remember this conversation with this person that I had a business situation with. And she was referring to another situation that she had had, actually, another business situation with. And I remember her actually saying, well, I got what I needed out of that situation and it kind of took it as far as I could go. So I don't really need that person anymore. And it was like, now that I understand what that person was about, it makes perfect sense, right? But she didn't need that person anymore. She'd kind of gotten what she needed out of it, right? So finding and hanging out with their new supply is one of the things that they do to distract themselves from their misery. Ooh, shiny new object. Let me move on to this next one. So that's number one. Number two is hanging out with their flying monkeys and talking about their targets. They love to do that. So I remember actually that too. I was not the flying monkey. I was the target. And I remember knowing who the flying monkeys were. And, of course, I was the one at the time that this business person had glommed onto as the source of supply. But then they glom onto that source of supply and then they want to devalue the supply, or they want to show the supply how good they are or how they can be better than you or hang out with people that are another source of supply or whatever it is. And you're supposed to somehow be jealous or somehow wonder what they're up to or something like that. And I remember thinking, am I supposed to be wondering what you're talking about? Am I supposed to be wondering what you're doing? Because I remember thinking, I know that's what you're doing. And I remember thinking, like, I don't care what you're doing. I don't care what conversations you're having, but yet I know that's what you're trying to get me to feel. And I remember thinking, I don't enjoy the game. I don't enjoy the attempt at manipulation. I just want to be out of this situation. But I knew that that was what was happening. I was aware that that was what was happening. And I remember thinking, how did I get here? How did I get sucked into the vortex of this ridiculous game? But I knew that that was what was happening. But hanging out with their flying monkeys and talking about their targets is something that they love to do to try to distract themselves, to escape their misery, for sure. They love that. All right, number three is preening and pretending that they are the person that they are masquerading themselves to be. They love to do that. I remember this so much, especially the two covert narcissists in my life. Both of the two covert narcissists in my life happen to be women. Definitely doesn't have to be women. Certainly a lot of covert narcissists are men. They love to preen, they love to parade and be the person that they want to portray themselves to be. So they love to be in situations where they can put themselves in to be that person. So, what's interesting to me is, if it's not working for them to be in a certain situation, they may say, I'm sick, or, I can't show up, or whatever, they'll cancel on you. But then if there is a situation where they can put themselves in to look good, like rush to the side of somebody who's sick or has cancer or something, so that they can look good, then suddenly they've recovered from whatever it is that they might have had, because they definitely want to put themselves in a situation where they can portray themselves as the person that they want to portray themselves as. And if this is all sounding very familiar, give me a totally in the comments so far. So I know that this is sounding familiar to all of you. So I want you to give me a totally in the comments. All right. So, and then the last one that they do to distract themselves is just desperately holding on to maintain that facade. Desperately holding on. I mean, desperately doing whatever they need to do to keep it going. So, what do they need to do to maintain that facade? What have they set up in their life to keep it going? So, if it's a work situation, if it's a charity that they're running, if it's something that they're doing at a volunteer situation, something within their family, whatever it is that they've got set up to keep themselves looking good, they've got to keep that going so that they can maintain that picture of who they are. So they, whatever they need to do, they desperately keep that going to distract themselves to escape their misery. And so those are the things that they do, that covert narcissists do to continue to escape their misery. And when they go to negotiate, by the way, it's all of this on steroids and they keep going. But once it all starts to break down, then you become public enemy number one, and it all starts becoming so much worse. And when that happens, you need to be on high alert. So without further ado, let's dive in. What are the kinds of tricks that they pull?
A lot of narcissists really like to use money as a tool for power and control and leverage. And so I think just sometimes just recognizing that it's not about the money and that it's about the power and the control can be helpful in normalizing. In terms of some of the tricks and going along the control theme, a lot of times they have all the access to everything. And so I think, I mean, what I see a fair amount is that translates into they have entire visibility over all of the finances, but then you don't have any access. So they have control over all spending, et cetera, those types of things. And so I think one of the approaches that can be helpful, not necessarily if you're going through divorce, but a little bit before then. Tell me if that's in the right track, but I imagine you probably have people that are contemplating divorce. But
yeah,
sometimes I think one thing that can be really helpful is if you're able, as you're trying to save the marriage, to convince them to sign up for one of these platforms like a Personal Capital or Mint or things of that nature that have account aggregation. So you can see kind of all of the finances at once. And if you can do it in the way of like, this is really a hot button for me and that we don't have transparency. And so like, it'd be really helpful for us to work on our marriage. And so you're still kind of giving them this semblance of control, but that can be a good way to backdoor your way into having visibility over all the finances, at least with what they're willing to add to the Personal Capital account. So that's something that I find can be kind of pretty effective there.
Well, those are both really, really good. Really, really good. I was just thinking, hiding money, they tend to, be the ones that'll move money offshore or put it in separate accounts or get paid in cash. And what happens is they've been working on their target for so long that the target ends up kind of feeling paranoid anyway, and feeling like the other person has all the control. And so they kind of have this imagination that there's all this stuff going on, and it may not be as bad as they might think, but they just imagine all the worst things, like, there's millions of dollars offshore, or there's millions of dollars being paid in cash. And their income is 5 times what they say it is. And, so I think part of it is, just kind of looking at the facts and also saying, okay, in today's day and age, it's not as easy to hide money, and money usually has a trail. You can usually see wires going places. I mean, it's really hard to move money around without some kind of traceability. I mean, there's going to be some weird wire to some bank in the Cayman Islands or Nevis or something that you're going to see, or some big amount of cash that was taken out and there's no way to account for what happened to it. So that's what I usually tell people. It's not as easy to hide money as people think that it is.
Yeah, and I think one of the things that I often suggest for people that, because like you said, people can kind of work themselves into a tizzy where the fear of the unknown becomes this massive problem and kind of manifests into a massive problem that may or may not exist. And so sometimes what I think is the best way to evaluate that relatively quickly, because the decision is primarily, I've got this lingering concern. Am I going to be able to move forward with this lingering concern or not? And so you then have options to address that concern. You can hire a private investigator and do, a world search of different bank accounts and see if something like that comes up. You can do, full forensic accounting and tracing, but all of those things come with pretty hefty price tags. And they also take your case in a direction that can make it really, really difficult to resolve amicably if the event that is, a possible outcome, which often isn't the case when you're divorcing a narcissist, but in some cases, that does work. And so, something that we often do is like the smoking gun analysis, which doesn't get to it's not a full tracing, but it's more just trying to look at all financial records for a year and do a real rounded corners that say, how much did we make? What happened in terms of the return on investment? And does it make sense for us to be where we're at? Because at the end of the day, your starting balance and your ending balance, the difference between those two are going to be based on gains or losses during that period, total income, less total expenses. So when you do that kind of smoking gun analysis and you look and you see how much in expenses does this imply that we had, is that in the ballpark? So, if you look at it and you say, I think we're spending $15,000 or $20,000 a month, and then you look at this type of analysis and it's showing $50,000 or $60,000 in implied expenses, then maybe there's something there that should cause you to do a real deeper dive, ask for 6 years of documents, bring in a private investigator, go further down. So that's often what we do. We call it kind of the smoking gun analysis of just trying to do it a little bit, kind of
like a back end way,
right? Poor man's way.
You back your way into it. I like that approach. That's good. And another thing, which is kind of like similar to what you were just saying, is like, if the person is paid all from one source, like a company, and the person is not paid in cash, maybe there's a C-level executive of some sort, but maybe they do get paid in many different ways. Maybe it's, restricted stock units, or maybe it's, I've had C-level executives that get paid in, various, like one was an Indian-owned company that the guy was like living in Brazil, but he worked for the American portion of the company, and so like some of his retirement stuff was in rubles, and then some of it was in like Brazilian reals, and some of it was in American dollars, and so but it all came from one source, the company, and so one of the things that I've done is subpoena the company and say, give us a breakdown of every single dollar this person has earned, or every single, bonus or stock or whatever. And, where did it go? Which bank accounts did this person direct it to go into? Give us the exact checking account, routing number, the bank name, because you go right to the source and figure out, okay, how much was made. And, okay, here are the expenses. And so here's how much should be left over. Here, what's missing here?
Yeah. I think to that point, I think step one is really understanding the compensation structure. Subpoenas
Right.
often are a more efficient way of getting to the bottom of things if you don't have full disclosure, or you often will get a very organized packet back from the company as opposed to bankers' boxes of documents that have been pieced together. So in some ways it can actually be more efficient. It does take things in a little different slant. But the other thing that I think is really important is that people get educated, because to your point, I don't think that I think a lot of people don't necessarily have a full understanding of how things like RSUs and stock options and how much people pay in taxes. And so, like, I've seen plenty of situations where someone said, "Hey, I think my husband's hiding money. Look, like here it says that 1,000 RSUs vest, and I only see 400 shares in the account." Well, 400 of them were withheld for taxes. And then I see that you sold 200 shares. And so a lot of times there actually is a good explanation. And so
Absolutely.
trying to get educated, and stock options are another great one, because sometimes there's actually no money that came into the account. It might just have been an outflow because you exercised the options but didn't sell. So yeah, those are really,
or maybe they haven't even vested yet. Maybe they won't vest for another 5 years. And if the person isn't with the company in 5 years, they're not going to even get them. So if they're not ripe, then maybe they're not even something that would be put into the pot to be divided. So I mean, there's that. But I think what happens is people get caught up in the cash element of things a lot of times. But it's like, do you want to spend $10,000 on a forensic accountant to recover $5,000 or whatever? I mean, How much cash are we really talking about a lot of times?
And the other thing
unless they're,
I think one of the other tricks that a lot of people do is put a bank account actually in their spouse's name. That's the other thing that I've seen happen quite a bit. And then
or a new significant other, or their brother, or their parent, or something. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, for sure.
But in particular in their spouse's name, because then usually they actually have full access and control to it because they were the one that said.
Well, I'm thinking in a divorce situation, if they're not liking their spouse very much at that moment.
So am I. This is so one of the one of the private investigators.
I mean, but then it's easier for them to get access to it. So I'm saying, like, they put it in a place where, hey, that's my mother's account. I can't touch that. That's that's her money.
Well, no, they have no idea about it. So this way, it's a way for them to get away from I was the one that hid money, because they're almost placing it more.
Oh, yeah.
You're the one that was.
Yeah.
The other thing that I think people do quite a bit in terms of just the financial abuse is you need to be cognizant if you drive a Tesla. Anything that has a computer in it can be a tracking device. And used to triangulate in terms of location, which is part of kind of that financial control dynamic.
Perfect. All right. Thank you.
Bye.
So you're dealing with a narcissist, and maybe you're dealing with them in a negotiation setting, in a litigation setting. It's a dissolution of a partnership or a relationship, whatever it is. If you're dealing with a toxic personality and you want to get them the hell out of your life, then how can you do that? How can you do that when you bring them to justice? So the first thing that I do want to say to you, and I've said this many, many times, is that there's a huge difference between law and justice. Law does not necessarily give you justice. Sometimes the lawyers or the judges can't really do that much. All they can really do is apply the law, whatever that is. So judges are actually tasked with that. They're tasked with applying the law. And so sometimes you think, but that's not really fair because it's, you know, they've done this, that, or the other thing. And it's really hard to get them to see what's actually going on sometimes. And a lot of times I get questions. How do you get the judge to see? How do you get the evaluator to see? How do you get the forensic accountant to see? How do you get whoever's involved to see what's really going on? Well, the first thing I'm going to tell you is do not say that person's a narcissist, or that person is crazy, or that person is unhinged, or bipolar, or whatever it is that you feel like saying, even if it's true, even if they're a bipolar, drug addict, crazy person. If you go in and you say that to the mediator, the arbiter, whoever it is that is you know, supposed to be meting out justice to this person, you're just going to come off as you're the crazy one. Because I'll tell you what happens. Judges have way too many cases on their docket, and they just want them off their dockets. And they, you know, people file through all day long, hundreds of cases, and they just quickly try to figure out what's going on, what's the easiest thing that I can do, what's the safest thing that I can do. A lot of times they don't want to get appealed. They get evaluated on how many times they've been appealed. You can actually, by the way, go and research and look to see how a judge is doing, how many times they've been appealed, how many times their cases have been overturned. And, you know, so when it comes time for them to be reelected or reappointed or whatever it is, however they got into that seat, they don't want any black spots on their records. So they just, most of the time, pick kind of like the safe route. And it can feel very, very unsatisfying when you know that you've been wronged or that they've been getting away with something for so long. I mean, narcissists do things like ignore court orders or show up or send, you know, awful texts or post, you know, terrible things on social media or whatever. And I can't tell you how many times clients have said to me, how are they getting away with this? How are they getting away with this? So the first thing you need to remember is that the only person who actually has any power over anyone to make orders is the judge. So when you are going in front of the judge, you want to make sure that you have very, very strong actual evidence, actual proof. And you want to make sure that you are presenting it in a way where that you're walking the judge to the conclusion that you want him or her to come to. And that's exactly what I teach you how to do in the SLAY program, because you're creating that strategy and the leverage, and you're showing the judge exactly what you need to show them so that you can get them to come to the conclusion you want. So that's one way. But another way is actually in mediation or in negotiations. How do you get them to come to the conclusion that you want? Well, the only way to do that is to create that super strong leverage. And the leverage is going to be something that threatens a source of narcissistic supply that's more important for them to keep than the supply that they get from jerking you around. Because there's kind of like a hierarchy of narcissistic supply for that narcissist. And you have to threaten the source that's higher level for them in order to make them want to come to the table. And if you want to know more about leverage, check out my video on that subject, and we'll make sure that we drop a link to that below as well. But this is all part of what I teach in the SLAY program as well. And if you are so ready to bring them to justice, give me a bring them to justice in the comments. So the next thing you can do when you are going to negotiate with them is make sure that you are researching not only your position and coming up with arguments that are bulletproof, but also researching their side. Because one of the things that you're going to want to do is be able to refute anything that they're going to say. So you're going to do, the research as if you are them. What is it that I'm going to argue? And then you're going to be ready to refute that. And one of the most powerful things that you can do when you are negotiating with anyone is, instead of even allowing them to bring it up and then you refuting it, you can even say right from the beginning, and I anticipate that you are going to say this. I anticipate that this is one of your arguments, and here's why that doesn't work. And here's why that's refuted in some way, and have really good information, facts, case law, statutes, whatever it is that you need to refute that and say, that's why that doesn't work. And then now you've already sucked the wind out of them, you've sucked the life out of them. And that's one of the ways that you can start bringing them to justice. So when you go to present your argument to them, or you present your, whatever it is that you are asking for, your first offer, your second offer, you will want to make sure you ask for way more than you actually want. Because remember, the narcissist is driven by making you crazy, making you miserable, by getting that supply from you, from doing that. And so you want to ask for way, way, way more than what you actually want. And you kind of bury what you actually want in that offer. So, and you throw them off the scent. Be very careful when you're even early on having conversations with them. Don't say, the only thing that really matters to me is this, because then whatever that is, that's the thing they're going to want to make sure you don't get. Okay, so, you can actually throw them off the scent by saying, oh, the only thing that really matters to me is whatever, and it's something totally different. So that if you end up having to give that up in the end, they won't even know. They'll think, oh, great, I got them. So the one thing you have to remember, though, is when you are bringing this narcissist to justice, is that they're not going to know that you've brought them to justice. If you think that you're going to be able to not only get what you want, but also have them feel that way, it's almost impossible. The best way to do it is to ethically manipulate them into thinking that they got one over on you, thinking that you didn't get what you want, because then you will actually be able to be the one laughing as you walk away. When you end up settling for exactly what it is that you wanted, you can be laughing to yourself, but you do, your best acting job by going, oh, well, isn't that awful? I can't believe you got that. This is terrible. I'm never going to be able to sleep at night. Whatever you need to say, because who really cares? They still have to live with their narky selves for the rest of their lives. You don't. You get to move on. You get to go live your life. And truly, they say that living well is the best revenge, and it's true. Once you break free and once you start your new life and you no longer have to live with that person anymore, it's going to be so much better. And so true justice will happen when you not only got what you want, but you've been able to move on, and you've been able to break free, and you've been able to forget about them. And that's when you know that you've actually beaten that narcissist.
Now, if you are dealing with a narcissist, then that narcissist is probably driving you crazy, or actually maybe even feeling like insane. And you're thinking, is there any way to make them panic? Yes, there is. But first, let me just go through a couple of the things that they do to you, because it's important to understand that so that you can understand the flip side of it and what makes them panic. So a couple of their go-to things are things like gaslighting. Gaslighting is trying to make you think that you're crazy. And what they do is they'll say, oh, we talked about that, or don't you remember that, or no, that's not how that went, something like that. And shifting what they said, shifting what you guys talked about, shifting what you said, so that it meets their agenda, which is to manipulate you and to make you think that you're crazy. So gaslighting is definitely one of their favorite tactics. Another one of their favorite tactics is lying. They are total pathological liars. The crazy thing I think about narcissists is that they'll lie about stuff that they don't even need to lie about. You know, you think to yourself, why are you lying about that? You don't even need to lie about that. But the thing is that narcissists think that they need to manipulate everything. They don't believe that they can get anything just in a normal way. They feel like they have to lie. So they will lie about even things that are readily verifiable, which is the thing that's pretty crazy. And in a lot of my other videos, I talk about making sure that you document everything that you do, because they will eventually contradict themselves. They will eventually put things in writing that are completely contradictory to what is actually happening or what they have said before. Now, they'll have some explanation for it, but that doesn't mean that you won't eventually be able to use it against them. Okay, so number two thing that they do on a very regular basis is lie. The third thing they try to do a lot of is intimidation tactics. So what I mean by that is that they will constantly try to make you be afraid. So they intimidate you in all sorts of ways. You're afraid that they're going to hurt you. They're afraid they're going to expose you. You're afraid that they're going to take your kids. They're very, very, very good at figuring out what your weaknesses are, what means the most to you, and that's what they'll go for. So if you're a mother and you don't want to lose your kids, they'll say, I'm taking the kids and you'll never see your kids again. If you are dependent upon this person for support, they'll say, I'm going to take everything and leave you in the street. If you want money from this person, then they'll use that against you. So whatever they can use against you, they will, and they'll scare you into thinking like, oh my God, my life is going to be so terrible if I cross this person. And there's all different types of intimidation tactics that they use. Some are more violent than others. If they're more of a malignant type of narcissist, some of them are a little bit more stealth if they're like a covert narcissist. But, all narcissists use the same kinds of tactics. For the most part, gaslighting is definitely one, lying is definitely one as well, and intimidating you in some ways is one as well. And another thing that they often try to do is triangulate. This is where they get their flying monkeys involved, and they get you to believe that all these other people have lined up a side by side with them, supporting them. And if you cross this person or you come out and try to expose them in some way, then you're going to be the one that looks crazy, and you're going to be the one that looks insane, or you'll lose all your friends, because everybody believes that this person is absolutely wonderful. And so obviously you're the one that must be insane. So the term flying monkeys comes back from the Wizard of Oz, and it was when the Wicked Witch had her flying monkeys on her side. And that's what narcissists do. They all do it. They all try to make you think that they're like so close to all these other people. And so therefore you shouldn't come out and try to say anything bad about this person because everybody else thinks this person is amazing. These are just a few of the things that they do. If this is all sounding all too familiar to you, go ahead and give me a totally in the comments. And if you are dealing with these things with the narcissist, which I'm sure you are, make sure you check out my video on self-care when coping with a narcissist. I will drop a link to that below. You want to make sure that you're taking care of yourself when you're dealing with a narcissist. I'm sure all these things sound really familiar to you, but in the end, okay, great. What can you do about it? So here's the not so secret about narcissists. That is that they are actually the most scaredy cats on the planet. They have no sense of inner value. I've often said they're like the chocolate Easter bunnies that are hollow inside. They have no sense of internal value whatsoever. So they've got to go and get all of their sense of value from the external. And that's what we call narcissist supply. It's in the form of compliments, money, prestige, whatever it is that they can get to get attention for themselves on the external. But the thing is, they're super afraid. So if you push back on them enough, they will back down. So what causes a narcissist to panic, to feel stunned? Number one, brutal honesty. They expect, because they're pathological liars, that most people lie too. They really just expect that everybody else is just as bad as they are. They don't understand what it's like to be a normal person. They've never been one, so they don't get that. They don't get that people out there actually have integrity. They understand the concept of it, but they just really don't believe that anybody else has it. So if you're just brutally honest with them, it kind of stuns them, and they're not exactly sure what to do with that. So for example, like if they, a covert narcissist is all often sick. That's one of the things that they do. They have this whole shtick that they're unwell in some way, they can't work or whatever it is. There's always some reason to feel sorry for the covert narcissist. And so, if one day they're super sick and then the next day they show up at something fun, something that they want to actually be involved in, because of course they don't want to miss out on getting attention for themselves, just without any kind of sarcasm or attitude or whatever, just say, "Oh, I'm so surprised that you're here. You said you were so sick yesterday." And you have to be careful, because if you say with any kind of tone whatsoever, they're like super sensitive. They can, they can sense it no matter what level of sarcasm it is. They'll feel it, they'll sense it. Even if it's not there, they might think it's there. So just make sure you're really saying it like as if you're reporting the news. I always say, like, just the facts, ma'am, right? Just, "Oh, I'm surprised you're here. You said you were so sick yesterday." They won't know what to do with that. So brutal honesty is number one. Okay, number two is pushing back. This is something that they don't expect, especially if you are used to giving in and acquiescing to whatever it is that they want. They will be really surprised, and it will make them panic if you push back against them. If they start to realize this person they thought they had total control over is no longer listening to everything that they do, or doing everything that they say, or buying into everything that they're selling, it will stun them, and it will start to panic them a little bit, because they'll be going, "What's going on here? Why is this person pushing back against me?" Something like that. Okay. So that's number two. Okay. And number three is exposing them. They do not want to be exposed for any reason whatsoever. If you really want to throw a narcissist into panic mode, let them think that they're going to be exposed, or actually expose them. If their flying monkeys find out who they really are, or if somebody that they respect gets to see some side of them that they don't want seen, then that's a really huge way to make a narcissist panic. So for example, in a mediation situation, if you know something about the narcissist that they don't want the other side to know, you might subtly say, like, that fact is going to come out. In my world, it could be that the person has a sexually transmitted disease and they are a doctor in the community. They probably don't want the world to know that. So especially if they got it by cheating on you and everything else. So sometimes, not going to court can be a huge motivator for a narcissist. It can really make them panic if they think that, the world is going to see things about them that they have taken painstaking efforts to hide and make sure nobody else knows. So number three is exposing them. Okay, and number four is losing control in any way. So remember what we talked about, that they're the most scared people on the planet. They're really like the bullies, you know how in A Christmas Story, that old movie, that, you know, the little boy fought back against the bully and then the bully ended up running away. You know, you're really just figuring out what their level is. And they're doing the same thing to you, by the way. So every time you push back a little bit against them, they'll act up even more. They'll do more of their lying, more of their control tactics, more of their intimidation, more of their narcissistic rage. It will spurn them because they'll think, okay, I just need to clamp down a little bit harder against this person so that they'll behave and get back under my layer of control. Or they might start love bombing again and then devaluing, love bomb, devalue. They'll start, you know, doing this campaign of love bombing again because they're trying to get you back into their layer of control. They're panicking. So losing control is something that really sends them into a tizzy. The reason they do all the things that they do, gaslighting, manipulation, lying, all the things that I talked about at the beginning of this video, is because they're trying to assert control over you because they are so insecure underneath. And the way that you can make them panic is by having them lose some of that control. And, you know, just like if you have a 2-year-old that has a tantrum, they're conditioning the parents. It's like, okay, if I scream loud enough, if I have enough of a tantrum here, if I cry loud enough, then mommy and daddy will give me what I want. And if you give in as a parent to that child, then they'll know next time I just need to scream louder, I just need to scream longer, and eventually they'll give in to what I want. So what the narcissist is doing is trying to figure out at what level do I need to act at to get this person back into my layer of control. And if you know, give into that, then they know I just need to be that much louder, that much more awful next time in order to get this person to come back to my layer of control. So if you really want to make a narcissist panic, let them realize that you're no longer buying in to that stuff. When they start losing control, that's when they super panic.
Let's talk about when a narcissist will actually leave you. I know you're like over here hoping, right? But, or maybe you're like worried. I don't know. But when will they actually leave you? So, well, let's talk about why they're actually in relationship with you in the first place, because that's the whole point of it. They attach themselves to you not because you have so little value, even though they're devaluing you the whole entire time. They really attach themselves to you because you have so much value. They want to suck as much value out of you as they possibly can. They're almost like leeches or, you know, vampires. Are sucking that out of you. They want that narcissistic supply. And if you want to know more about narcissistic supply, you can check out my video on that. You know, they have this endless need to feed this thing inside of them, this beast inside of them. They have this emptiness inside of them that will never be fed. It's like a black hole that is bottomless, you know, and they want you to feed it. You probably, when you first got into a relationship with them, wanted to feed it too. You didn't realize that it was a bottomless pit, you know, that can never be fed. It's a one-way directional spigot. It will never be two ways. And they somehow always figure out a way to get that spigot going this direction and never the other direction. You know, once you're no longer fueling that, and they realize that you're shutting off that spigot or that, you know, that source, then they won't want you anymore. If you're no longer a good source of supply, then they won't want to be in relationship with you anymore. So if you start to stand up for yourself more, or whatever that was that they were receiving from you, if that supply source is starting to shut down, then they're no longer going to want to be in relationship with you. So if you start to set boundaries, or you start to shut off that money source, or you start to shut off whatever that source of supply was that they're getting from you, then they're going to want to shut off relationship with you. And let me tell you, your value to them is in direct relationship with like the ratio is indirect. It's directly related to how much value they're getting from you. I mean, it's a very sort of transactional relationship, but it's almost like, I don't know, mathematically, like they get like 1,000 out of you, you're going to get like a little teeny little thing. In other words, as long as they're getting supply, as long as they're getting something, then they'll come back. But if they're not getting anything, then they will not be in relationship with you. And once that supply source, if they don't feel like they're getting what they want, then they're gone, and they're gone with nothing, no feeling whatsoever. I mean, and whatever it was that you gave them, there'll be no sense whatsoever of thanking, acknowledgement, feeling of gratitude, nothing. There will be no remorse, no apology, no sense of empathy for whatever it was that you gave them. It will be discard, gone, whatever. I just want to go through some of the signs that you might start to see that they may be starting to be done, so that you can start to see some of that. But, they might start to feel distant from you. You might start to see some sense that they're just always in a bad mood with you. With the narcissist, you do start to see that a lot anyway during the devalue phase. But during the devalue phase, they usually are hot and cold, hot and cold, hot and cold. When they're starting to go into the discard phase, it's just always cold, always cold, always cold. They're just always distant, always distant. You start to see that they never care what you think. They're just always gone. They're just always taking advantage, always using you. They're not in any sort of, caring at all or worried. Usually if you start to pull back from them at all, like, where they start to feel like maybe you're going to maybe step back, then they start to pull in again and love bomb you and future fake you and do what they need to do to pull you, rein you back in. You don't see that anymore. They don't really care. Or they might start accusing you of doing the things that they're doing. If they're cheating on you or they're doing things, they might start to accuse you of that, so that they're sort of preempting those things, so that when the time comes that they are, getting out of the relationship, they want to be ahead of that. Well, you were cheating first or something like that, to make sure that it's sort of tit for tat, that sort of thing. And let me tell you, it'll be the best thing that ever happens. So, should you be worried if this person is about to discard you? It's probably going to be the best thing that ever happened. But you do want to prepare yourself, so if you think that this is coming, you do want to prepare yourself. You do want to make sure that you have your documentation in check. You do want to make sure you have everything that you need lined up financially. You do want to make sure that you have a stash of cash. You do want to make sure that you have a place to go, a place to live. If this is a divorce situation, if it's a business situation, a business partnership, make sure that you have a succession plan in place. You do want to stay 2 steps ahead of them if you see that this is coming, and get a plan in place. Okay. If you do think that it's a divorce situation, make sure you watch my video before you divorce a narcissist. Watch this. If you are dealing with this and you're managing this, I have a whole video series on self-care to deal with narcissists. Definitely check that out. And, the best thing you can do for yourself is just move on. And I want you to just put that in the comments, just move on, because that is the best thing that you can definitely do for yourself.